The central station is in ruins. The tower that houses Vigil City's top heroes, that represents hope against evil. It barely stands, a gaping hole in its side and scorched by all-consuming fires. The official news crews of the city were ordered to cut the story once it became apparent that heroes were losing, but that doesn't stop hordes of people from all over standing in a shocked and frightened hush nearby. A precious few cameras are out and recording videos that they know can never be shared once the scale of this is covered up. No one knows at this point what the story officially will be, what the heroes will tell the public, what the news will parrot. That's just the way things are, how they've been forever. Except, that's not right, is it? As body after body is pulled from the crumbling rubble, some of them only recognizable from the burnt uniforms they wear, it becomes apparent to everybody watching that everything is about to change. It's all due to the villain that was once described as the city's most popular hero. Hey Records! Miss Vinyl is back on the flip disc, the only show where you're getting the finest stories from all across the multiverse, and I'm happy to be with you guys, showcasing another story from Vigil City in Universe 7. I'm also excited to announce that this is the debut story for our 6th audience, Universe 16. Hello and welcome, we're happy to have you, and what an episode to join us in. This is a sort of update to a previous story, with a lot more digging based on the most recent developments, but don't worry, everything will be explained again. With all that said, let's get into the story. There were a lot of ways that you could describe Artillery. She was one of the more popular heroes. Her no-nonsense attitude and occasional sharp comment to the press made her stand out against the more composed faces you'd see in every other team. One thing you gotta know to really understand the story is the basics of Vigil City politics. Skip to the timestamp on the screen if you've heard this in another story and don't need a refresher. Vigil City claims to have been founded by the first hero team after some sort of apocalypse destroyed the old world. I haven't been able to find any evidence to contradict this, but it was at least 150 years ago, based around the oldest photos and artifacts I could dig into outside the official sources, which I know really can't be trusted. The city is run in a rough fashion by a government mostly known as the Agency, which is in everything from governing to the news to infrastructure. I'm gonna be so honest with you, I'm not a fan of these guys, or the mysterious director who hasn't made a public appearance in years, but I do my absolute best to give you all the information and let you form your own conclusions. The Agency relies on the Cadeau, or superpowered, or enhanced, or metahuman, whatever you want to call it, police force, also known as the Hero Teams, to keep order and law in Vigil City. I know that many of you are familiar with superhero secret identities, either from your own worlds or media, but it's not the case here. These heroes are their calling card and don't exist outside of it, at least to anyone's knowledge. There are various stations around the cities for heroes, but they eat and sleep in apartments assigned to their teams, which also doubles as a workspace. Okay, last important thing. You aren't ever going to see a hero operating solo. There's always a team, usually like maybe 5 people, but I've seen as small as 2 or 3 and as big as 10 before. There's a whole team ranking system, there's celebrities, the whole 9 yards. They're kept in groups to ensure a sense of camaraderie and hold our heroes accountable to each other. The Agency's words, not mine. Cynics would say it's because it's harder to run away when your coworkers know where you sleep. Anyway, as what I was saying, when Artillery came onto the scene, she was brand new, with just enough spunk to feel like a real human. Her team, they called themselves the New Dreamers, which was pretty obviously inspired by the Dreamers team, who unfortunately got wiped out a few months prior to the New Dreamers' debut. It was an intense fight with 2 underground vigilante groups, the Carmine and the Brass Rebels. Everyone thought the heroes had been all wiped out, confirmed by the city listing all 7 of them as deceased. The whole massacre was a big deal. The leader of the Dreamers was popular too. He was absolutely adored by his many fans. So it was even more shocking when a member of the New Dreamers turned out to be the youngest of the Dreamers, having mysteriously survived when no one else did. The Agency never gave an official statement about him being alive when previously dead, or why he wore a mask over half of his face, or anything, really. And Blue Static, that's his name, always refused any questions about his miraculous recovery or revival, or whatever it was. In my search for more about him, interviews where he actually spoke instead of deferring to his teammates were few and far between. The public still doesn't know the details of how he survived or who he really is, even after 4 years of people digging. The third and final member of this team called himself Ares, spelled like the constellation of the ram. He was in his mid-30s, previously on another hero team called the Zodiac, which got disbanded for reasons I could never figure out. The de facto leader of the small group, due to the virtue of being a decade or so older than the other two, even though he was soft and kind-natured to seemingly everyone. Despite being smaller than a typical team, these three quickly got a reputation for coming out on top of any fight thrown at them despite the odds, and their family-like dynamics of a tired father and 2 siblings made their image quite positive in front of a camera. Publicly, they were pretty straightforward. Blue Static could manipulate and generate electricity, throwing lightning around like it was an extension of his own body. Artillery fought alongside a collection of living cannons she could manifest from seemingly nowhere, each with its own personality and specialized ammunition. I found footage of reporters interviewing one of them before it got bored and went back to her side for pets before disappearing. Ares rounded out the group with his abilities centered around hard light constructs and radiant energies, all wrapped up in the star-themed aesthetic that the Zodiac was known for all those years ago. Together, they were ridiculously effective. When I went around the city asking about the trio before everything went down, the New Dreamers were the favorite hero team of at least 1 in 5 random people who would talk to me. With there being over 1,000 teams of various sizes in the city, that's pretty respectable. About a year and a half into relatively normal shenanigans and the new status quo, tragedy shook the team on a final mission in pursuit of Kinetic Centurion, another member of the Dreamers that had survived, but turned out to have been working for the Brass Rebels and led his previous team into the aforementioned massacre. The agency's official report on what happened next is 6 pages long and somehow explains almost nothing. It's actually impressive. Most reports accidentally contain information eventually. Anyway, we know that the building with the leadership and Kinetic Centurion in it went down in the middle of the fight with few survivors. According to Blue Static, the only one to emerge unscathed, Ares was definitely dead before the building went down, despite the body never being recovered. Artillery was pulled from the rubble barely alive, with the pull through her chest gruesome enough that most observers expected her to join her team leader within the week. After that initial conference, Blue Static refused every interview for almost 3 months afterwards, only returning when Artillery came back to have the agency announce her miraculous recovery and the newest member of the New Dreamers, a previous prisoner of the Brass Rebels who named himself Punk Rock. He's a character, more outgoing than even Artillery, but we'll go more into him later. With Artillery now leading the team, the group mostly faded from the public spotlight. The interviews to get to know them outside of Crisis vanished. Everyone at the time assumed they were all grieving, but looking back, I think it was the first public sign of fraying at the edges. One of the strangest things about Vigil City is how little anybody talks about who heroes used to be. I've investigated serial killers, fairy tale curses, and at least one incident involving weaponized raccoons. In every case, in every other universe, people want to speculate. Here, it's different. Ask someone on the street who Blue Static was before he became Blue Static and you'll get a shrug. Ask about who Ares was before his debut and they'll look uncomfortable. Ask who Artillery used to be and most people will immediately change the subject. I genuinely cannot tell if this is just cultural conditioning or an actual law that nobody tells me about, but long story short, it's impossible to get any information normally. But, since I'm not exactly a normal investigator, I managed to get a total of 2 direct sources that actually saved this case. I need to keep these 2 completely anonymous, because if this episode ever got into Universe 7 in any way, I'm worried their involvement would put them in danger, and I'm not about to endanger my saviors. Following their information led me to the North Side, a collection of neighborhoods along the river. The North Side is one of the poorest districts in the entire city. Broken infrastructure, aging housing, neglectful heroes, small businesses struggling to survive. It's pretty bad if you find yourself in a dark alleyway at any time of day here. And yet, it's where our story actually begins. Born as Danielle Lebrun, roughly 17 years before her public debut as a hero, Artillery was one of these poor souls that couldn't ever really expect anything out of life if she wasn't willing to fight for it. As the youngest of 3 children, it was already a strained situation, but it got worse when she was around 4. A home invasion, fairly par for the course, turned violent and left both of her parents dead as she and her brothers escaped out the window and onto a fire escape. Danielle and her brothers, Raymond, who was 10, and Lucas, who was 6, were taken in by their uncle Jose, who owned a junkyard and repair shop. It's not as charitable as an arrangement as it sounds. Everyone worked, everyone earned their keep, nobody got special treatment. By the time Danielle was old enough to hold a wrench safely, she was already helping around the yard, and she took to it like a fish to water. Everyone in the area that frequented Jose's junk knew that she had a knack for putting stuff back together, fixing things that should have been impossible, or assembling a self-healing dog that would make a physicist cry out of a broken car engine and a burnt-out refrigerator. News of Danielle's cadeau didn't get far. It's always better to keep those sort of things to yourself, especially in these types of neighborhoods, but the trusted regulars and her family friends knew. Besides the puppy, who earned the name Scrappy, and he's a very good boy if I do say so myself, most of her creations were small trinkets and gadgets she'd sell on the streets and peddle south of her neighborhood on her days off from her uncle's work. A lot of that money she saved. She always wanted to be more than she was, determined to move upwards through the city, to take her and her big brothers out from under their uncle's thumb and have a future with all three of them. At least, that's what she said at the time, when wasted on alcohol stolen from said uncle when she was definitely too young to have it. One of the few times she dipped into the savings was just in time for the Residence Showcase, right after she turned 13. This showcase is a pretty big deal. It's one of the few annual events and organizations in the city that isn't overtly controlled by the agency. It's this massive talent competition, with everyone having their eyes on it at one point or another. The competition attracted performers from across the city, with winners often receiving professional contracts, sponsorships, and citywide exposure. Winning performers often found careers overnight. For musicians from poorer districts, this was considered a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The registration was especially pricey, despite its reputation for being an equal opportunity deal, but Danielle paid for it anyway. It wasn't her registration. Her singing voice and stage presence at the time were worse than Scrappy the dog. The name on the ticket was her older brother, Lucas LeBrun. He and his guitar were apparently the dynamic duo of the streets, songs of his own creation echoing against buildings and under bridges. I was able to listen to the two that have survived in the recording when I was in the area, and they really were something special. He dreamed of performing in the showcase and winning it since he'd been little, and this was his chance. He left early that morning in order to get to the venue on time, his siblings waving him goodbye and planning on tuning into the show on the shop's ancient television that only ever got the 5 agency-approved channels. What they didn't expect that a little less than an hour before Lucas was set to perform, the vigilante group Carmine, remember them from earlier, attacked the convention. Anyone with at least 3 brain cells in Vigil City immediately understands what that means and the scale of it, as if I said a tornado hit or there was a gas explosion. It's just one of the things that happen, and the heroes try, but usually the damage is already done. Lucas was among those who didn't return home that day. Danielle was heartbroken. She spent the majority of her time for the next while just sitting in her room, staring at the wall. My source thinks she never really forgave herself for being the reason he got to go, even if no one else blamed her. A direct quote from him says, "She spent a lot of time in bed, staring at nothing, and we all kinda worried that Jose would kick her out like he kept threatening if she didn't earn her keep. But one day she just got up, with the fire in her eyes like she wasn't a kid anymore, and she said to me, 'I'm going to finally do something for us.'" A month later, people across the north side started reporting sightings of mass vigilantes. Not heroes, vigilantes. There's a big difference. Officially, Vigil City defines a vigilante as a civilian that uses cadeau or force to enact their will upon other civilians. Broad enough to include everything from neighborhood defenders to organized gangs, and they're equally prosecuted when the agency cares enough about them to catch them. These particular vigilantes seemed focused on protecting the residents where hero patrols rarely bothered to go. Stopping robberies, breaking up assaults, escorting vulnerable citizens home. One elderly woman who brought me in for cookies spent almost 20 minutes telling me a story about pepper spraying one of them because she assumed they were criminals after they saved her from a mugging. Around 24 or so individuals were in this group, the North Agency, as they like to call themselves, over the years. and it still is active, as far as I can tell. The only one whose identity I can reveal without worrying about them getting more hurt than they already have is their leader, whom you've probably already guessed is Danielle, going by the name Artifice during her time there. They'd hold meetings in the junkyard at night, which Jose really didn't care about so long as they were gone by morning. They organized patrols, all the stuff heroes should have been doing for the district, but neglected to. One of my favorite little details I noticed while observing this group is their sense of unity, represented by their calling card. Danielle's favorite color was orange, and every single vigilante affiliated with this group had this really specific particular shade of orange somewhere on their person, as a sign of, I'm with these guys, I can be trusted. Danielle made the dye that the majority of them highlighted their hair with. I'm not fully sure how, but I thought it just had to be brought up. For years, the North Agency stayed an open secret. The heroes around there were all too keen on being lazy, so long as they wouldn't face consequences for their neglect, and if both sides didn't touch each other, they could live in a relative peace. All of that changed on a random Wednesday, when Artifice was out and witnessed a large blowout battle between the Carmine and the Brass Rebels. Maybe you can see where I'm going with this? You've heard me mention both of them several times by now, but what I really haven't explained is that the Brass Rebels and the Carmine have hated each other for ages. I don't really know why. The strongest information I was ever able to verify was that the Brass Rebels originally split off from the Carmine years ago. Nobody agrees on why, nobody agrees on when, nobody agrees on who betrayed who first. What everyone does agree on is that they just absolutely despise each other, and have spent years turning the chunks of the city into war zones when tensions boil over. Like I said before, it's ridiculously hard to find out anything about this fight. There aren't many people left willing to talk about what happened, if any at all, who know what happened. The most detailed story I could get, direct from one of my sources, goes like this. After the Dreamers arrived, they quickly got overwhelmed, especially when Kinetic Centurion turned against them. Once their leader, named Dreamer himself, died, Static, as he was known back then, unleashed a butt-ton of lightning on everyone in the area, ending the fight pretty decisively as everyone fled or succumbed to their wounds. I couldn't tell you exactly what happened next, only that later that day, Artifice was seen dragging the fresh corpse of a hero into her workshop back home, kicking everyone out of her space, and by that evening, an invention of hers was in Static's chest, beating in place of his heart. A miracle in every sense of the word, wrought by the hand of a 16-year-old girl who functioned on basically spite alone. She told her family and her agency in the following days that she thought it was her power's limit. No way to prove it, but she just knew. The 2 weeks following what I'm going to call the incident were tumultuous for the Northern Agency. Artifice didn't give much thought to what she was doing until after she did it, apparently, and there were a lot of unintended consequences. Static was basically completely amnesiac. Not only did he have zero recollection of who he was before, he couldn't seem to keep a hold of any memories for very long. I'm not a biologist, but I'll wager a guess that it has to do with how memories are just electrical signals in our brains, and he electrocuted his entire body pretty hard before Danielle found him. He'd reset every few minutes, get confused, and try to wander when he was unsure of where he was. The duration of how long he'd go without a reset lengthened over the few weeks, and he began to remember details like his and Danielle's name, but it was still a very rough process. Most of the vigilantes avoided him. Heroes aren't exactly liked on the north side, if you couldn't tell, which means that Artifice spent a lot of time with him, taking care of him. I know for a fact he was never really able to recall these few weeks he spent here for the rest of his life, which feels like a tragedy in its own right. When I asked why Artifice would do something like this, nobody could give me a clear answer. Some thought she simply couldn't stand watching someone die when she knew she could stop it. Others thought she saw an opportunity. My first direct source just laughed and told me that Danielle had always been incapable of leaving broken things broken. Whatever the reason really was, no one ever ended up asking her. They never got the chance. The next North Agency bi-monthly meeting ended in disaster. Halfway through the gathering, a team of hero enforcers crashed the meeting and attempted to arrest everyone present. Fortunately, all those evacuation drills turned out to be useful. People scattered immediately, escape routes were opened, evidence vanished, Within minutes, most of the organization had disappeared into the surrounding neighborhoods. Danielle and Static weren't seen by anyone involved afterwards until 2 months later, when the New Dreamers debuted, paraded together in new colors, with new names. Let me tell you something that barely anyone in Vigil City knows about how heroes are made. They're obviously human, regular people, up to a point, and that point in time is when the agency takes notice of what they want and decide to take it. They offer any new hero a deal that they literally can't refuse. For some, this is the fame and fortune that comes from being a hero. Others are offered a second chance at life when they have nowhere else to go. That deal, it's held over any hero's head like an executioner's axe, keeping them in line. Here's what I think, and this could just be speculation, but from what I've heard about how exactly artillery fell, it's got more weight to it than just a theory. The agency never touched Danielle's North Agency again while she was artillery. I think the clearest option is that she was offered a trade. Her loyalty for their freedom. When I first resolved to do this episode, before I knew about anything related to Artifice or the North Agency or the Orange Hair Dye, I knew I had to answer one specific question. When was the beginning of the end for artillery? What pushed her to go villain, to start her destructive crusade against the heroes and the agency at any cost? The thing is, you could convince me of a lot of moments now that I know the story behind the blue-tinged hero. It could be when the heroes never came to save her parents. It could be Carmine's attack on the Resonance Showcase. It could be the agency activating Static's tracker to bring him back, or heck, even her own decision to rescue the dead hero off the streets. I could be convinced for any one of those, but I feel like those moments belong to Artifice. Danielle's own creation and choice, rather than the hero artillery. So I've decided that the beginning of the end for artillery was the moment that Ares fell in love. Yeah, not exactly where I expected the story to go either, but the full story isn't going to make sense if I don't at least give you the basic rundown. The entire ordeal is a painfully blind spot in my investigation because it was covered up ridiculously well, and I don't think I would have ever suspected if I didn't have someone who knew about it, but yeah. It had something to do with a mission that Ares did with the Zodiac, but he fell in love with a civilian, which you're definitely not allowed to do. Real star-crossed lover situation. Remember, heroes don't have lives outside their personas, not anymore. Sometime before the New Dreamers went after Kinetic Centurion, he approached Artillery and asked for her help in orchestrating a fake death for him so he could run and be with his girlfriend together. And he must have been pretty convincing because he did quote-unquote die some months later. Really, a reasonable request to make of your coworker that you've been living with for almost 2 years. I wasn't able to confirm if he really did have a new life in the city with his girlfriend, maybe wife, or if he managed to leave somehow, but my source was completely sure that Danielle did her part in the cover-up and that he was still alive. Her favor to her friend at that point in time is, in my opinion, the first domino in a long chain that led to her eventual breakdown. In that fight with Kinetic Centurion and the Brass Rebels leadership, Artillery took a massive blow from the falling debris that sent a pipe through her chest and clipped her heart. She wasn't gonna live much longer, if Blue Static hadn't been digging around through her side bag for more gauze and found one of the small machines she'd used on him years prior. She probably would have been dead on arrival. Recovery was extremely tricky for her, especially with the agency pushing her to full capacity faster than was safe and giving her the leadership position on the team, along with Punk Rock coming sometime later with his own deal with the devil that made leaving impossible. You could maybe guess by his name, but Punk Rock decided to name himself around his music hobby and the brash attitude that always got him in trouble growing up. One of the first things he bought for himself upon gaining his new name was a guitar, and he and Artillery bonded about her experiences with music, her older brother, his guitar. It was very sweet. Even around 4 years after the initial incident that led to Blue Static's memory problems, he still hadn't fully recovered. Sometimes he'd just not recognize a friend, or forget that Ares had died, or be in the middle of the apartment and not understand anything he was doing. For the longer-term stuff, he had a journal that was his most prized possession, writing in it constantly when he could get little scraps of his life before the incident. He never seemed to forget that Danielle was his safe person, no matter how confused he was, so he stuck by her a lot of the time. You just gotta feel for the guy. It's a rough situation all around. Not to even mention the worldview he had to be constantly reminded of when he would forget. Between the three of them, filling out the loads of paperwork and taking calls on business just ended up being too much for them to handle, on top of their actual hero work, so the agency sent them their solution. A secretary, which, if we were going to be working on a much shorter timeline, could also be considered the beginning of the end for the New Dreamers. Katherine Johnson was nobody before she got sent to work for the New Dreamers, and I mean that completely literally. No school records, no work experience, not even anything on the census. No one knew of her existence until after her first day on their floor, which is always a bad sign, and such an obvious one at that, I wonder how she even got the job in the first place. She was a sweet girl, a year or two younger than Artillery herself, who seemed to be experiencing everything she did for the first time. It was easy to like her, with how excited she seemed whenever you'd walk in the room. Artillery in particular took a shine to her when the hero learned that Katherine didn't live too far from her old neighborhood, but she never said such out loud. As the summer went on, she started coming in with tired eyes, random bruises, the occasional ankle sprain. Everyone on the team had their theories. Punk Rock recognized some figures of speech and assumed she was ex-Carmine, working for heroes to stay safe and probably fending off those trying to retrieve her. Blue Static thought she had an abusive partner or roommate. Artillery was so certain that Katherine had taken up vigilante work. In fact, she was so certain about it that when she had to dye her own hair blue for agency optics, she made a small batch of that orange dye and streaked Katherine's hair as a formal recognition. And can we talk about that? It ended up being not the best thing in the long run, but I still think that hair dye as a language is the coolest thing, and my host over there does not think it is cool as I do. Whatever. It's whatever. And the craziest thing about that little interaction there, she was right, at least in part. Katherine had recently been spending her nights stopping petty crime and interacting with some members of the North Agency, which still existed, despite being smaller since Danielle's departure. Apparently, it was one of the longest-running members of the group that eventually saw her with those colors, and put together that Artifice had sent her from where she was now, and brought her to the next bi-monthly meeting. If we were going at an even smaller scale, the beginning of the end for the New Dreamers was the day that Katherine came up onto their floor with one of her internal organs about to explode. Apparently, being in a world full of superheroes doesn't let you escape from dear old appendicitis. Katherine had gotten really close to the team over the past couple months, occasionally joining them for dinner, sneaking out the back way with Punk Rock, which, whoa, missed a whole side plot there, settling various petty arguments about the color of household items, getting her hair dye, generally things you don't do with your bosses, you do with your friends. Somewhere along the lines, she stopped being their secretary and started being a part of the team. Anyway, they were able to tell something was wrong pretty obviously, and when she eventually went unresponsive, she got hero-level medical treatment, and the surgery there definitely saved her life. I'm gonna be so for real. Everything revolving around Katherine feels like the details of a fever dream, and if and when I manage to track her down, she gets her own episode because I cannot understand anything about the conflicting accounts I'm given of her and what actually happened. I'm sorry the details in this section are fuzzy because I really tried my best, but people are people and defy logic, okay? Okay. Katherine was kept overnight for observation afterwards, despite it being a fairly uncomplicated procedure, where she got several phone calls from a number not saved in her phone. She apparently freaked out when she learned this and went home, yelling at the heroes to give her space. When she returned the next day, it was time for the proper end of the New Dreamers, and I swear, it's real this time. Remember that back way out I mentioned maybe a minute or two ago? Yeah. Katherine came in like normal, disabled every alarm the team could have pulled for backup, barricaded the front door, and then opened the back way for Carmine enforcers to spill into the room like water. Even a team as impressive as the New Dreamers can't stand against those numbers when being caught by surprise. It was a painful reveal for the team. I can only imagine how painful it'd be to be betrayed like that, twice for Blue Static, but feelings probably had to be pushed aside when little demure Secretary Catherine pushed a gun to Blue Static's forehead. And then, almost as quickly as she had betrayed them, she rolls around, fires a weapon on one of the other Carmine, and then jumps out the decently reinforced window. Do you see why I'm confused about her everything? The fact that the central station was attacked was on the news later that day, but not that the New Dreamers were the target or that they were betrayed or anything useful like that. Catherine disappears off the face of the earth, to the aether she came from, I guess, and both punk rock and artillery went missing after that too. Blue Static was reported in the agency to be in the hospital, and as far as I know, that hasn't changed in the past few months. Tying back, the beginning of the end for the New Dreamers was probably maybe Ares falling in love, and then leaving, and then work being too much, then hiring Catherine, then Catherine's betrayal. Does that make sense? Oh, I hope so. I wasn't the only one with questions when I first heard about the initial attack, the one where 2 top heroes went missing and another was hospitalized. It's when I originally started digging around to the team's origins, found my sources, and began building a story to show what life actually was like for a hero on the inside of the agency. That was before artillery staged her attack. A month later, on the central station she lived in for years. To the public, it came seemingly out of nowhere. Imagine it. You're going about your day, maybe in the central square, maybe at home watching the news about some villain or another being thwarted by an up-and-coming hero team, when every screen around you crackles with the emergency alert noise the agency only broadcasts once in a blue moon. Everyone knows what that sound means. Stop and listen, stop and look, this is mandatory viewing, so everyone in earshot tenses and prepares to get a message from the director of the agency, only to be confused when the lost hero, artillery, is the face on the screen. For the sake of time, since this episode is already way longer than my normal ones, I don't have her message word for word. Instead, take the Cliff Notes version. I spent my entire life trying to help people. Trying to keep the people I loved safe. But this city is rotting from the inside out, and you cannot fix it. I've tried. The only way out of this is to start all the way over. There were about 30 seconds between her broadcast and when the bombs planted on the central station went off. Crowds gathered to watch it burn. After that, nothing stayed stable for long. Not officially, anyway. The agency's control over information started to fracture almost immediately. Reports contradicted each other, response teams arrived too late or not at all. Entire districts began operating like they were waiting for instructions that never came. If you only read the official version, artillery becomes a villain, a hero who snapped, a traitor, a mad woman. But every time I try to treat that explanation as final, I keep running into the same problem. It doesn't explain why she targeted everything. Not just the agency, not just the central station, but the systems underneath it. The groups that existed in the cracks. The organizations that were already half buried in silence. It wasn't selective, it was sweeping. Like she wasn't removing enemies. Like she was removing a foundation, and I don't have enough information to tell you what that means yet for sure. But I do know this. Whatever artillery became that day, it didn't happen in those 30 seconds. It started long before the broadcast. I think it started with everyone else not noticing or not caring the shape of the system that they were standing in. It's like the entire city was a diseased forest, and she decided the only solution was a controlled burn to make room for new saplings. Now, look, obviously, I'm not condoning mass murder here. I know that the people who died in the tower had families, their own lives, their own Lucases, and I'll never be able to tell those stories because I simply don't have enough to know about them. That's the story, as far as I can take it in the modern day. There's a lot of loose ends, trust me, I'm aware. Danielle, Artifice, Artillery, whatever you want to call her, she's still out there as far as I know. The story isn't done, and maybe once I feel it is, I'll be able to update you guys on how everything went down. I feel like the deeper I dig here, the more questions I have, and there's a lot more to understand about these people and what their future holds. Thank you again, My Records, for listening to me once again. If you have questions about what I've gone over, have relevant information, or have a new story to share from your universe or another, please get in contact with me. I'm always looking for new connections. Stay safe, stay informed, and have a good day. Together, they were ridiculously offensive. They were offensive. Rebels were tequila or assembling a self-healing what? Who wrote this grammar? Help. So I've decided that the beginning of the beginning sounds so Minnesotan. And then opened the back way for Carmen Enforcers. Carmen. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Everyone failing to notice the shape of their sisters. Yes, everyone focus on your sister's shape.